starting a brand new series today, which I'm excited for because I've enjoyed preparing for it. Ordinary People. It's about the apostles, which is very fitting given that we have just started the fast of the apostles. Now, our series is going to go beyond the end of the fast, but what we're going to do is kind of look at all the apostles. Before we get to the apostles, let's talk about Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln is known as probably one of the greatest presidents of our country. Known to be one of the greatest presidents because he abolished slavery. And what made him, like this abolition of slavery, made him such a great man that everybody looked up to. And if you actually go to the Lincoln Memorial and look at the memorial, it's actually kind of breathtaking because you walk in and he's huge. And if you go and you read some of the things that were written or that were said in his speeches, it's actually quite amazing some of the things that he has said. But even though like going to the Lincoln Memorial is somewhat breathtaking, when you start to look at the biographies of Abraham Lincoln suffered from depression. He suffered from a lot of mood disorders, and he was recorded to have a couple of mental breakdowns throughout his life. And so you may go and you may look and see like, oh, look at Abraham Lincoln, what a great man, he freed the slaves. But behind this massive monument to him was a man who was broken, a man who struggled from depression, a man who struggled from dealing with the stresses of life. And so, similarly, when we look at our disciples, and traditionally in a church, you would see that the disciples are lined up on the top side of the icon statues, but we'll use our small picture here. But when you see the picture of the disciples in the churches and here in this icon, you get a sense that they're somewhat iconic to us. We think of the disciples as these were the followers of Christ. These were the ones who started to spread the Christian word after Christ ascended to heaven and after the descent of the Holy Spirit. And sometimes we look at these men and we think that they are untouchable. That these were the disciples, but this is me. Disciples are great. I'm never going to have anything close to what they have. But the truth is, if we look at the disciples a little bit more close than just peering at an icon, we'll see that the disciples had certain characteristics. All right? If we look at them from a social standpoint, they were mostly Galileans, and the Galileans were lower class citizens. They're low-class citizens that were on the outskirts of Jerusalem, in the surrounding areas, and they weren't very educated, and they were reserved for some of the lower-class positions in society, being fishermen, the most common one of the disciples, the most common occupation of the disciples. Also, we get another sense that we know that Matthew was a tax collector. And so, looking at their social status, they were the outcasts of society. If we look at them from a spiritual angle, they're no different than you and me because they were sinners. And they needed a Savior just as much as we need a Savior. The other thing that they have that we can probably find common ground is that they were completely spiritually unaware of what was going on in their own lives. So it's very easy to kind of look at the icons of the disciples and they can almost become iconic to us and put them out of reach. But they're not as out of reach as we think. And there's more common ground between us and them than we realize. But the question that I want to raise is, why these men? Why these 12 men? Why did God choose them? If we look at their social status, we look at their education, we look at their occupations, and from their occupations we get a sense of what gifts and talents they have. We can ask the question, when God was trying to bring salvation and the good news of His salvation to the world, why choose these men? Why choose these? And so I want to read a verse from 1 Corinthians 1, 26 through 29. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things that are mighty. And the base things of the world, and the things which are despised, God has chosen. And the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. So if we look at this verse that St. Paul wrote in the book of Corinthians, and we look at the disciples, we see that he chose these 12 from the lower class, the sinners, spiritually unaware, few gifts and talents, because he was aiming for his glory, not their glory. See, if we aim for human glory, if our goal is to glorify humanity, then we will look for the greatest human talent out there. We would look for the greatest human talent out there. But if we're looking for God's glory, then we want to pick from the bottom because we want the glory to go up. And so Jesus chose these 12 because his goal and his aim was his glory, not human glory. And so as he started to work with these 12 men, he took them where he took them at the stage in life and the condition that they were in, and he started to work with them. And that's what we're going to look at over the next several weeks, but there's a nice quote by Brother Lawrence in this book called Practicing the Presence of God. And Brother Lawrence said, I shall never change if you leave me to myself. I shall never change if you leave me to myself. So in his contemplations, he always looked at God and he said, God, this is who I am. I'm the bottom of the barrel. And I will always stay at the bottom of the barrel if you leave me there. But if you come and you interact with me and we work together, I can be something else. But if you leave me, this is where I'll stay. And so the disciples came, they were at the bottom of the barrel. But in the same spirit of this verse, of this quote by Brother Lawrence, the disciples said, well, if you leave me, that's where I'll be. But if you come and I'm with you, then there's potential for more. There's potential for more. And so, what we have is Jesus, who started his ministry, but he started his ministry alone. And as he started his ministry, he didn't start from the beginning with these 12 men. He started preaching, sharing the word, talking about repentance and forgiveness and God's interaction with humanity, and now's the time of salvation. And from his teachings and from his healings, people were starting to follow. And we get a sense that he started to call some people. And we get an account of this in the first couple chapters of John, where he called Philip and Nathaniel and Andrew. And Andrew brought his brother Simon. So he started to call them, but they weren't necessarily the 12 at this time. They were people who were intrigued by what Jesus was doing. They were people who were intrigued by his teachings. People who were intrigued by the miracles that he was doing. People who were also being fed by the multiplication of bread and fish. And so, as Jesus gained a following, of this following, he eventually had to choose 12, not 2. He chose 12. And it's kind of fitting because as Jesus went through his ministry, the opposition to his ministry became increasingly intensified. And so as he came closer to his time of death, the Jews were continually putting his ministry and him under scrutiny and under threats. And so, as he progressed through his ministry, he now changed his tactic from first only preaching to the multitudes to now a group of disciples, or followers, to an even more close group of 12. Because he wanted to invest directly into others. Invest very intensely into others. And very deeply into others. And so he had to whittle the 12, the hundreds that were following him, all the way down to just 12. And so if we look at Luke, which gives us a nice description of what happened to whittle these, the hundreds that are following him down to 12, it says, "Now it came to pass in those days that he went out to the mountain to pray, and he continued all night in prayer to God." Luke 6, verse 12. What was he praying for? What was he praying for? At first, you'll be like, well, he's got 100 to choose from. A lot of people are following him. Don't you want to pray for the right decision? It seems logical to me. If you told me, like, all right, out of 100 people, I want you to choose 12, I would say, okay, God, help me choose 12. Which ones? Is it that one or this one or this one? Was Jesus really faced with a dilemma of, like, I'm not sure who to choose? Because when we talk about an all-knowing, all-powerful God, omniscient, the whole argument of like, well, he didn't know who to choose kind of breaks down. So was he going up to the mountain to pray, God, like, I'm stuck on this one, show me the 12, highlight the 12? No, he wasn't doing that. And there's a couple verses that I want to read as to why we say that. If we look at John 15:16, this is at the end of his ministry. He said, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear the fruit, and that your fruit should remain." So Jesus told him, this is after the Last Supper, when we have the longest recording of a conversation between Jesus and his disciples. He said this in 15:16. He said, "I chose you, that your fruit should remain." And I'm going to follow up with another verse in John 17, where he says, "I prayed for them." This is his prayer to the Father. "I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me, for they are yours." So Jesus was not praying up on the mountain saying, "Show me the 12." He was praying for the 12. So he spent all night saying, "I know who the 12 are. You told me who the 12 are. But I need to pray for them all night. Because as I pull out these 12, I'm pulling out these 12 for something very special. And they're going to need a lot of prayer for what I'm calling them out to." So he went up to the mountain and he prayed all night. Because he knew that these 12 were going on a very special journey. And when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Apostles gives us a sense of why he prayed all night for these 12. So if we look at the word apostles, let's go to the Greek. Quick history lesson. So apostolo in Greek is to send out. So we commonly think, well, send out is like a messenger. You would think of somebody who's being sent out as a messenger. But if we look at the Greek word for messenger, we get the word angelos, which is angel. And if we think commonly of Gabriel the angel, he was sent out to go deliver a message. So we can't necessarily say that apostolo in Greek is sent out, or we can't equate it to being just a messenger, because they were more than messengers. So apostello takes on the meaning or understanding of what an ambassador is. Now I'm going to do one more thing. Did Jesus speak Greek? No, he spoke Aramaic. And so now we're going to do one more translation. So what's the Aramaic word that's equivalent to apostello? I had no idea how to look it up, so don't worry. Aramaic equivalent is shaliah. So the word shaliah was used for a position that the Sanhedrin, which was the governing body of officials at that time, they would appoint a shaliah. And the shaliah would go forth and he would be the representative of the Sanhedrin, and whatever he did with the full authority of the Sanhedrin. And so another way that the Aramaic word shaliah is translated out is to be, I wrote it down because I knew I was going to stutter on it. He said, shaliah is the one sent by the man, is as the man himself. Shaliah is the one sent by the man, is as the man himself. And so the disciples were the shaliahs of Christ, sent out as if the man himself. But before he sent them out, he had a lot of training to do. And so, if we look at the disciples, they lacked spiritual understanding. This was a group of men that we're talking about. They lacked spiritual understanding because, as we read in the book of Acts, even until his ascension, Jesus was continuing to teach them. The very last second before he ascended, Jesus was still teaching, still trying to make sense of things. They lacked spiritual understanding. They lacked humility because commonly on the road, they're like, well, who's the greatest? I'm the greatest. And your mama comes in and says, I want my 2 sons to go sit at your right hand. Humility did not run high among the disciples. They were all fighting to be the greatest. All right? They lacked faith. How many times did Jesus turn to them and say, oh, you have little faith? Commonly, or most poignantly, we remember the story of Peter walking on water. He lost his faith. And so he started to drown. And many times, Jesus looked at him and said, where's your faith? They lacked commitment because even as Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, they couldn't commit to standing by their Lord. And they scattered. We also see that there was a struggle with commitment because for a while, like they were following Jesus, but when we look at the story of Peter, who was fishing all night, caught nothing, and then when the Lord said, go into the deep and cast out, it was only at that moment that he started to really follow him, and then later on was called an apostle. So they lacked commitment, and they lacked power. They lacked power because they were many people brought sick people to them, demons to be cast out, and they couldn't do it. And they brought them like, Lord, how come we can't cast out this demon? So they lack power. A lot of deficiencies in a group of men that you're going to choose to be ambassadors, shalias, who will go out and be as the man himself. But there's something that really differentiates the disciples from us. Is that they spent a lot of time with the Lord. And in that meaningful contact with the Lord, had an effect. And we read this effect in Acts 4:13. And it says, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, and perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men, they marveled, and they realized that they had been with Jesus. They had been with Jesus. Everybody knew, looking at these 12 men, that they were the outcasts of society, they were the uneducated, they were sinners, they carried odd ends and jobs. But the one thing that they were able to see, that these 12 men, they were with Jesus. They were with Jesus. And so, when we look at the disciples in Christ, I think there are 2 bars in my mind that are set. First one, I really appreciate because I think the disciples set the bar of qualifications to be with Christ very low. They set the bar very low. But they set one bar really high. The qualifications, that was low. Anybody in this room? We're all qualified. But the one bar that they set high was their meaningful interaction with the Lord. Was the personal time that they walked with the Lord. That bar is high. And so, when I think of these 2 bars, I find the qualifications can be low, but the time spent with God is very high. It really tells me one thing, that it is Jesus alone, and our direct and immediate interactions with Him on a personal basis that become the source of our personal transformation. That the qualifications may be low, but the time spent with God the meaningful personal time spent with God, that bar is high. It's from reaching this bar, reaching for this bar, not trying to improve these, but reaching for this one. That personal transformation comes. It's from this deep, personal interaction, direct interaction, meaningful relationship with Christ that brings forth transformation. It was not the 12 sitting there like, oh, Andrew, I'm tired today. Go listen to Jesus' sermon and I'll take the clip notes afterwards. No, they didn't do that. They all stood there. They sat at the feet of the Savior. And it was person to person. Now, one of my favorite things that I've shared before is like, when we do the 8-week study that I've talked about, emotion and spirituality, it's towards the latter, sessions in that group that we really talk about things that I've mentioned before, but I'm going to mention them again. We talk about different things that put us in a situation to have that personal and meaningful and rhythmic interaction with the Lord. We talk about things like taking rest for a day out of the week, to sit before God. We talk about things of building in rhythms of life, so that I'm not scrambling to find out or wondering when is the next time I'm going to be able to pray. I'm going to set a time, and I'm going to work the rest of my life around this sort of rhythm that puts me into this meaningful interaction with the Lord. We also look at things of how to create a rule of life, and starting to map out our lives and saying, wait a second, if something is wrong and I have an imbalance in my life, then for sure I'm not meeting the Lord on a regular basis. And so the disciples here are such a model. Model of low qualifications, but they're a great model. They're very personal and intentional time with them. And one of our hopes in this community is to empower everybody to build this meaningful relationship. To not rely on somebody else to go and listen and give you the cliff notes. But to say, look, if I want to be transformed, then I need to be intentional. I need to not worry about my qualifications. I need to worry about the intentional time that I have with the Lord, the meaningful time. If that is not there, it's very hard to follow in the footsteps of the disciples. And their footsteps are very followable. They're not mystical. They are men who follow the Lord. First, person to person. And in that transformation, and in that time, came the transformation. And as we move on through this series, we're going to look at the individual people, the individual disciples. And we're going to look at them kind of one by one. Not all of them, but we're going to highlight some. Next week, we're going to start with Peter. But we're going to see how much these men are just like you. God transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. God transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. I want to be an ordinary person. And I am an ordinary person. And it's that time that I spend with God, my personal time, when God does something in me. And it's the time that you spend, and God does something in you. And when we collectively spend personal time, and God does something great in this kingdom. And we start with the basic, and then we get bigger. If you want transformation, you have path. It's that time between you and God, just like the disciples. So look at your qualifications, reach for the bar, face-to-face time. So we're going to take our couple 30 seconds to a minute, and we meditate on our week and say, in our week, how intentional am I in my time with God? How intentional and rhythmic am I in my